They say we should have known better than to fall so deep down into this rabbit hole we found. And I was thinking.
Hi, this is Nikolai, and you're listening to my dad, Rafal, co-host James Jardine, and featuring Mr. Jim Tiller on the one and only Down the Security Rabbit Hole podcast. Plug in, listen up, and enjoy.
Deep into this pool of regrettable situations, which brought think back to the last time that we were happy.
All right, good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Welcome Down the Security Rabbit Hole to another edition of the Down the Security Rabbit Hole podcast, an episode with a motley crew. Well, plus Paul, and Paul's, like that way in the corner there. We like to put Paul in the corner. But I told the guys, this is a good episode that I'm coming back from vacation. We didn't have one specifically planned with a big topic and a speaker. So I'd like to do these after I come back from vacation because I'm good and riled up. And it'll be fun to just kind of ham it up a little bit. But this... I said, hey, guys, pour a drink. And I know, James, you don't drink, but we'll have a conversation about that later. You clearly love this industry. But for those of us that like the finer spirits, this is mine today. It's a Kings County Distillery peat and bourbon. It is the oldest, New York City's oldest distillery, which means it's probably like 15 minutes old because everything's illegal in New York, including fun. Jim, over to you. What do you got?
I have a gift from a friend that I've cracked open for the first time today. Yum.
I know. Mine's mostly gone.
Oh, okay.
I didn't know I was going to have to retrieve mine, so I had to go to my shelf.
There you go.
So I'm drinking a Hill Rock Solera aged bourbon whiskey that a friend introduced me to.
That is one of the finest. If you're going to go Solera aged and you like that sort of wine aging in whiskey barrels, that is the thing to go to. So first off, cheers. As they say back home, Zdravia. James, sorry?
I got nothing. Yeah.
Sure.
So
I had to be the clear-headed one for this late night recording.
Yeah, well.
When it always gets riled up.
Listen. So this morning at like 4:15, James, what time did you post that? So we got a text message chat going. And James likes to give us early morning reading assignments. James, what time did you post that?
That was at 7:30 this morning. It was
okay. Well, that's not that early.
Must have felt early to you or something. But
yeah, I mean, coming back from vacation, anything before 11 feels early. But there is a I'm not going to do this justice. Go ahead and line this up, James, and we'll just tackle it head on.
Yeah, I saw this article this morning talking about JLR getting a 1.5 billion pound bailout, basically. And if you don't know, JLR is a Jaguar vehicle brand. But they got hit by ransomware, I guess, back in August. And I mean, it completely shut them down. And so I guess the government decided, hey, this is affecting a lot of things, so we need to help back them up. So they got a government-backed loan to the tune of 1.5 billion pounds or $2 billion.
I just want to that's a B, 1.5 billion pounds.
Yeah.
Loan.
Well, it says they'll have to pay it back within 5 years. It'll be commercially backed loan that they have to pay back within 5 years. But they estimated that they could ultimately lose out on 2.2 billion pounds in revenue and 150 million in profit. So they felt that they had to bail them out to get that. That's why I was so adequately putting in the chat this morning that we should title this "Crash Out to Cash Out."
Well,
go big or go billion.
What's crazy about this is there's reports that they didn't have their cyber insurance totally nailed down. So now I don't know how true that is. That's just what some folks are saying. But if that's true, then what we're seeing is the government jumping in to build a bridge there because of the cascade, right? Of the, all the downstream impact of this.
Everything I've read that since Jaguar's catastrophic rebrand a couple months back, maybe a year back, I don't know, a little while ago. They have like dropped off the face of the planet in terms of production and sales. So, I mean, is this maybe they couldn't afford to go buy cyber insurance anymore with sales down because that's a very real problem. But to be completely shut down, and it feels like everything is down, everything is off, nobody's going to work, and people lose their jobs. There's a look, guys. We live in a world that's on a screen in a laptop, but like there is very real world impact to this. And there are consequences to the way things happen out here. People eventually lose their jobs if and companies close if you can't produce as a manufacturer. Like
so, Raf, something. Sorry, James.
No, go ahead.
Talking with people, there's a lot of people that still think it can't happen to them, that still have the mindset of either it can't happen to me or it won't because whatever, insert, I'm too small, I'm too, whatever the reason is, not realizing that this kind of hits everybody. And the analogy I say when that is if somebody says, oh, well, I mean, I'm just, then they proceed to explain. I say, okay, tell you what, you wait here. And I'm going to go to your place of business and I'm going to unplug everything with a power cord. And you're not allowed to plug it back in for 2 weeks. What does that do? And every single time their eyes get big and they're like, and you're like, okay, that's a ransomware attack. And I don't understand why more people aren't catching on to this. Like with Jaguar, it's not just them. If it cascades to their suppliers, all those suppliers are depending on their business to stay in business. And so the ripple effect is huge.
It also makes me feel a little bit, your first point, Paul, about like mention of cyber insurance ties right into what you were saying there too. Like one, I don't think it's going to happen to me. And two, cyber insurance is my answer versus why do we not have disaster recovery plans in place? And you know what I mean? Like we've kind of bypassed that to be able to not recover. And we've seen this, I mean, with an airline with the CrowdStrike incident, right? Like we were unable to get back up and going when something happens. And I was just looking up because before we started recording, I mentioned the Sony hack from back in 2011. They were down for 23 to 24 days. So AIO review tells me. And as we know from previous recordings, I trust that. I'm not going to dig into actual research, but AI says 23, 24 days. Where like this one's already past that. Right, for how long they've been down, and now they're talking about slowly being able to bring systems up. So, it's a good question of thinking, hey, what are something as big as that? What are your plans that if something happens, how do you recover from that?
Is that like a too big? Is that like a too big to fail thing? Like, remember the bank crisis hit? Everybody's like, well, you know what? We can't let that bank fail. Too many people will lose their livelihoods. Too many people will lose their lives. Let's bail them out. Do we think that teaches? Because to me, right, that's a YOLO moment. Like if I'm the board, I'm like, hold on. If we don't have a security program, we don't do the right thing. And by the way, I'm not saying that's what happened over there. I'm simply giving you a scenario. If they're having a really bad time, things go sideways, then they'll just get bailed out. What's the incentive to do the right thing?
Yeah, so I got to jump in because I'm going to be sort of the curmudgeon that represents the small company that just dropped, $1 million in paying a ransom. Right now, I look at the news and see because you're big that you felt pain, so the government's going to cover for you, right? So I think I struggle because at some point, what is that line? To Raf, your point, what is that line? Do we target that line? Do we run for it and say, hey, we're too big to fail, government gives money? You know what I mean? It's terrible because in one sense we have all these regulations that are penalizing industries around, I don't know, call it privacy or all these type of things that are circling the wagons and you're left to your own. And then all of a sudden the government decides, okay, we're going to help you this time. Right. And I'm thinking to myself that's a lot of money. And who's in charge of distributing those funds and how are we assured that it's going to make sure what's going to happen? But meanwhile, there are hundreds, not thousands of other companies just in the UK alone that have paid way more or some similar amount of money out in ransom. It's a very I think it's very dangerous. It's a very dangerous precedent. Oops.
Maybe we don't need security teams. We just insure.
Oh God.
So
Wow, he said that loud.
maybe we just say, hey, you know what? Instead of trying to figure out like how to incorporate the security team into the business and all that kind of stuff and really look at this, because it's kind of hard. It makes my head hurt. Maybe we just get insurance and we pay for the insurance, and whatever the insurer says we'll do, we'll give that to the IT team to implement. And we just don't worry about thinking about security. Now, for the record, I think this is the dumbest idea ever. Let me just say that out loud. But I think in a way that's kind of where some people end up, because I think we have two angles. Security people have a hard time fighting out of the details and talking about resilience. And okay, that's great. I can fight it off in 3 days, but then you're going to have to recover, or you're going to have to operate during that time off a pad and paper or whatever it is. So security is kind of to blame in part for this, security professionals, but the business people, I think they need to take a step towards security and learn a little bit. They don't have to be the experts. That's fine. We got lots of people that do that, but they need to take a step in. And there's precedent for this. If you actually look at all of the C-suite, right? CFOs started out as bookkeepers. And in the 80s and 90s, they became strategic advisors. CMOs, they started out arguing about the colors in the logo. And God help you if you use the wrong template on the PowerPoint slide, right? Now they're doing go-to-market strategy and CX stuff. And you can map across the C-suite in the same exact thing. But what all of them have in common is they had to shift to be business focused and think holistically about the business. And the other peers of theirs had to accept them and take a step towards them. And I think we haven't seen that. I think you see one side or the other making a move depending on what the company is. But this shows that if you do this wrong, it has to work in concert. You have to have the security controls, and you have to understand your resilience measures for when it all goes bad, because it will. There you go, Ralph. I'm just going to drink that.
Yeah, you should do that. So that insurance angle, I mean, we know that it's not as simple as like, don't do anything, insurance will get it. Insurance companies are getting smarter. They're coming up with a minimum, like you must be this tall to ride this ride, right? You must have this much security to buy insurance. And sometimes you can't afford it. So where do you go when you're too broke or too poor to afford real security, and you can't afford insurance as a result of that, right? Or the premiums would be crazy high. I wonder how many companies, I wonder how many commonly known household brands are riding that, like, boy, I hope nothing happens, razor's edge. I really wonder, because, I mean, Jaguar's fate aside, like, that's not a nothing company. That those guys produced some of the most iconic vehicles of my generation, certainly our generation, right? There were some gorgeous things they produced in the 70s and 80s. Yeah, they've been doing some nice cars. The fact that they've sort of lost their way, I think, in automobiles and marketing is a total aside. But that's not a nothing brand. I mean, it's like Burberry, Coach, Barnes and Noble, maybe not, but because but like Sears, right? Like big brands do you guys know Sears? Does everybody know Sears? They're still, I think they're still around.
No,
like all these iconic giant brands that have been around forever. Maybe not, some of them, maybe not even forever, but they've been around and they have a lot to protect. And I wonder are they riding that razor's edge? And to your point, Paul, like what is preventing the cataclysm from happening outside of dumb luck?
I wonder too, a company like Jaguar, looking at them from the outside, you see car manufacturer, right? But I mean, even per the article, they talk about like the downstream. I mean, you've got leather manufacturers, you've got, all these accessories. Like there is a lot of stuff that goes into the vehicle. And one, it makes me a little bit wonder, from a major organization standpoint, are they even taking that into like their threat models, their risk assessments of all the downstream, or are they just looking at, oh, here's our organization and it's in Jaguar specific, right? But any company like that, are we looking at it from that perspective to say, wow, if something happens to us, it's not just us. We are, top level to this, which also has these suppliers, which has these suppliers. At what point do you consider yourself critical infrastructure almost to that point? And then, we've seen this before. Clorox got hit, right? And there were bleach shortages at Sam's Club because, we're not getting any shipments. They're not shipping any Clorox. How do you make that distinction to say, hey, this is big enough that it matters? I think, to your point, Jim, versus, you know what? You're a great fad and all that, but okay.
Can I make a point by reading a passage from this article? Because this is important, right? So it's 3 paragraphs that I think just absolutely crush this nail right on the head. It is estimated the impact of the cyber attack threatens around 120,000 jobs at Jaguar Land Rover and companies across its supply chain. That's point number 1. The second one is this guy named David Bailey. He's a professor of business economics at University of Birmingham. He said Jaguar Land Rover could be hemorrhaging between 5 and 10 million pounds sterling, or 6 to 13 million US dollars for every single day that production remains halted. That's a problem. And then the coup de grace here is he estimated that JLR could ultimately lose out on 2.2 billion pounds sterling in revenue and 150 million in profit. Holy crap.
So I think this highlights 2 things. So we're talking about these big numbers, right? And the ripple effect. And I think that's true 100%. But my question about unplugging anything with a power cord, I was actually talking with a small business owner, and his position was, why is this important to me? They're not going to come after me. They're going to go after the big people. And what he realized in our conversation was that it was important to him. It was important to I don't know how many people he has, the 10 or 15 people that work for him, right? So he's a super small shop, but it would affect their livelihoods. And so, that just scales up with the size of the company, but it's affecting, this is why boards are worried about cybersecurity, but somehow we're still missing the connection from boards say cybersecurity is one of their top 3 risks consistently, but then enablement of it as a business concern, right? It's still a technical concern of, did you deploy this? Did you implement this project? Rather than what's our resilience strategy?
Interesting enough, Paul, I think kind of to what I was saying from the top-down approach, what you're saying makes me think of from the bottom-up approach, right? Don't think of it from a Jaguar, but we just said there's all these, second-level suppliers that are relying on them to exist. I'm the guy that puts together the leather seats, or I put these pieces together. At that level, what are people doing from resiliency? Because your point of unplugging something isn't just the server's down, right? I got ransomware. What happens when your supplier is down? And we're not, it's same concept. Okay, hey, we're selling this stuff here. What happens if they just disappear? What's our
really
plan?
Connected economy.
But to build on that point, you can see a scenario where if you're top of the food chain, you're worried about suppliers because that is the feeding of your ability to generate revenue. But you're at that same level. You're not necessarily worried about hurting your suppliers necessarily, right? You're worried about your company, and you're not going to think about the risk you represent to a total ecosystem. I think that's kind of I won't say a failure, just a reality of companies that maybe they're not always taking into consideration, which is a little bit of an interesting sort of perspective on risk and the concept of risk management and how we look at risk as a business from a cyber perspective or otherwise. But I will say this, not to go off too far off tangent, but I kind of fall back on the thought is, here we go, Roman candle in that direction. The thing is one of the things that's consistent among every example that we're giving is none of these companies, like many companies in the world, they don't make security, right? They make cars, right? You mentioned leather or electronics or devices or whatever. And so when the aperture tends to close down when you're going through tough times, or God forbid you're compliant and security looks great, maybe I cut back on my security investments a little bit because everything seems fine, So it's one of these things where organizations that are really honed in on a certain thing, like such as manufacturing, where, metal's getting cut, burned, and bent. It makes that's your focus. That's what you do. And security is ancillary, and it's already adjunct to IT in many cases for all the reasons we've talked about many times, right? So you have this sort of separation that continues to evolve while simultaneously building a giant supportive ecosystem under your company to affect over 120,000 people. So it's a very interesting dynamic. And I'm not entirely sure, to James, your point is these are conversations that are happening at the top levels of big businesses.
Also kind of interesting to think, because I think about this with Colonial Pipeline. They're a good example of it. They don't really say what suffered ransomware in their organization. Was it manufacturing? Was it the billing system? Mm-hmm. Was it something else that it was like, hey, look, this is a critical component. Because I can't do X, I can't bill, so I'm not going to share gas, right? Like, until we can fix that, no, we ain't giving that away for free, right? So we don't really know. And I mean, a company like this, I mean, we're talking 120,000 jobs. We're talking all these different components. We're not talking about a non-complex system that they're dealing with, right? Yeah, I mean, you're talking OT, IT, every T.
Well, and that's all the T's, spill the tea. So that's where I was about to go. Is sometimes it's not in the IoT, right? It's not affecting their line, but they have to shut it down because they don't want it to get there. Because if it does, that's something people don't realize about IoT and how fragile it is, right? If it gets into there, it'll wreck components that you literally it's done. You have to throw it out and put a new one in. And those things aren't designed to be swapped out. So you better hope that a laptop gets ransomware, because that's pretty easy to flip. I mean, relatively so. If all the IoT that runs a manufacturing plant goes belly, you're toasted. I mean, it's bad. I saw a number recently that 30% of companies don't have a named security leader. And this was kind of a blended stat, but it still blew my mind in that even if that's the CIO, right? Even if you're hey, the CIO, you also have security. And it's just people don't get that it's a business issue. And I wonder, with the JPL thing is, all this just-in-time inventory, right? So they literally can't run their plant if they can't do the ordering. It's like people thinking that food comes from the grocery store, right? There's a long tail to that, right? And the only way that happens is when the floods happened in North Carolina because of the hurricane. Ingalls Payment Processing Center was up there, and they went down. So Ingalls couldn't take credit cards, and so the Ingalls by my house, it was crazy. They were cash only, and it sent a ripple through the community of what do you mean I can't just go in and tap? But we're so dependent on that we're not really thinking about how fragile some of that ecosystem is.
If I may, Paul, just real quickly, is your point about fragility, especially in these highly complex manufacturing systems with all the T's, is the original newswire from JLR, only 4 sentences, right? In JLR, it was impacted cyber incident. We took immediate action to mitigate its impact by proactively shutting down our systems, and goes on to say that we're working at pace to get things back up and running. There have been a number of occasions where I've seen organizations, oh my God, pull the plug. And then you realize that you shut down a system that just doesn't turn back on, because of this complexity. And it's interesting because it could be one simple system, like the credit card processing for Ingalls after the hurricane. That could be just kind of holding them down like an anchor. We don't know, because this, to James, your point earlier, there's really no way to really understand what was exactly impacted. But it just goes to show you the fragility of modern systems today, because they're so, I don't want to say integrated. It gives the wrong impression that they're all working happily together. And it's not.
I'm going to give you guys an example from a 2001, 2002 time frame. I was working at GE Energy at the time, and we had a facility that made aircraft parts, right, up in Ohio. And and a lot of these machines were old Windows, because why wouldn't they be? They're, it works, don't fix it. Lots of old legacy equipment. I'm talking about Cabletron hubs, that kind of stuff. And the Sasser worm hit. So imagine, just like a hypothetical, okay? You've got a 10,000 person football, 2 football field wide or 2 football fields long shop that's making aircraft part engines as it goes down the line. And well, you got this machine that precision cuts the blade, like one of the blades, right? One of the fans. As it's cutting, machine reboot. Uh-oh. So now what? Well, that piece is that is scrap metal. Next. Now multiply that by 10 or 100. Now you got 1,000 people sitting on their hands, and they're like, what are we doing? And we have to go turn everything off. And the solution is, well, we can't replace those machines because we haven't thought about, like, you can't do that in the heat of the moment, right? If you haven't planned it, you've planned to fail. You cannot do that in the heat of a moment. We were on hubs, not switches. I can't even drop switch ports. So what can we do? We just dropped the entire facility. Made every local paper there, made national news. Like, and we look at this and we're like, wait, 22, 23 years later, are you kidding? But so apparently it's still a thing.
But Ralph, we've made cyber. I'm sorry, I'm like spitting. I'm like, we've integrated cyber into everything except our business reality. And so how many times, and I can tell you, I hear this a lot when I'm out talking with people, right, where they say, oh, I'm just whatever, insert thing here. Like, I'm just a shipping company, Maersk, right? Like, I can imagine somebody saying that. No, security, we don't want to implement that. Look, we ship containers. Like, we're not a cybersecurity super tech firm. Shut up. Get back in line. Right? Well, right until it takes down your entire thing, think about the ripple of that. Or, and anybody else, this current example. But since we've put cyber into all of this, even the FBI has changed how they fight crime. So last year I went to the FBI CISO Academy. It was an awesome experience. But there they explained how they used to have cyber as a totally different stack. And then it kind of dawned on them that cyber is enabling every single other type of crime. And so it's now this horizontal. They still have some dedicated stuff over here, but it's a horizontal that's an enabler for all the stuff they do, right? And so I think, a business should copy that approach, right? Cyber should be across. Like, don't keep me out of the business meeting. You need me in there because I'm going to see things that you don't even think of.
How's that struggle, though, with, to kind of almost move this into another area? And I saw a post on this morning about 3 different types of CISOs. But a lot of these things are very different, right? And you're getting a lot of people that are moved into the cyber leadership position, either because they were technical and the company said, hey, we need somebody to do cyber, so let's just promote you, right? I mean, I think we've talked about it on the episodes prior, right? I mean, people with like 2 years of out of school and all of a sudden they're CISOs at these companies, right? Like there's a lot of issue with, do we have somebody that's capable and expertise enough to have those discussions? Because let's be fair, somebody that may sit and have a great conversation with, a small company that's doing a startup for authentication is not going to be the same person that's going to sit at Jaguar and say, hey, these are the type of risks, because they've never been exposed to them. And they're just kind of guessing. I've never worked in manufacturing. I've never done this. You're going to sit there and be able to make that differentiation between, hey, these components we can swap out, because a new motherboard for a machine, easy. New part that moves a fender from here to here, that robotic arm, I just don't have spares of those sitting around because they're not cheaper to have just, you know what I mean? And there's a lot of stuff. I always say in security, right? It's one of these awareness, like once you see something, you remember it. But a lot of people, until you've seen it, we have no idea. Thank you to all the hackers in the world that have shown us, hey, this is how we're going to break all your stuff, because all the defenders would be like, they're not getting into this. There's no way they'd do it, right? Because they didn't think that way. So how do we get to that point where you're saying, okay, I need a CISO or a CSO for this type of organization. Can I take somebody from healthcare that's been a CISO and just drop them in? Will they be successful in such a complex environment with that type of stuff versus where they were before? I don't know how interchangeable some of that stuff is.
I'm going to go back to my point before. I think it's a great point. I think you have to be a business leader who has cyber experience, right? Just like I'm a cybersecurity dude. I've done a bunch of that, but I have technology experience. Like, look at college students that get cyber degrees. They come out with all the words around cyber, but they don't understand what a Windows event log is, or they don't understand how to set up a Linux server. They're not very effective because they don't understand their operating environment. And I think this is the same thing. You have to be a business person that understands cybersecurity and to be that translator. And I think we're seeing people starting to do that, but it takes two to tango. The business leaders have to stop writing CISO job descriptions that say knows how to configure, Fortinet firewalls, right? And actually has you in the business meeting. And then security people need to step into that and go beyond an inch deep in the business of the company. That's the only thing that'll dig us out. I think we're going to stay stuck where we are until we get there.
I think it's also time to bring back this crazy idea and this thing we used to do called the business impact analysis, the BIA. If that thing goes away, if I pull the plug out of that machine right there or that device right there, what happens? Guys, I have, like when I worked for HP, we used to do these work for that guy We used to do these things with strategy engagements with customers, and I love asking, hey, what's the most important thing in this environment? And inevitably the IT people would say something. Then you go ask the people that run the business, like, hey, what's the most important thing in the environment? Like, oh, undoubtedly that. And those circles very rarely, those intersected on a van. Yeah, they're pretty far apart. And the IT people were like, what do you mean? Authentication is extremely important. And the guy and the people that like run the company like, yeah, but if that machine stops working and is not able to get instructions anymore, like we can't produce the thing that makes your paychecks. That
I can tell you per minute what it costs us if the line stops moving. Right? That's right.
I am not meeting enough people that can do that in their business, and they look at you weird, like, well, and guys, this was from 20 years ago. I would be when I first started speaking, I would ask things like, hey, what does your company do, and why are you relevant? If people be like, well, we do, I do security. I'm like, no, that's not what you do. You protect stuff. What do you protect? They're like,
sadly, that's still the response, though, right? Is it not 20 years later? I mean,
it's crazy.
I struggle with this constantly. And there's a part of me that, Paul, you brought up a very sensitive topic for me when it comes to writing job descriptions and looking for a leader in security and how, that's a whole long story in of itself. I need 1,000 years of experience to get a junior job or something ridiculous. But
at the age 23, Jim, you're too,
100%.
You know what I mean?
But God forbid you don't have a certification, and well, then you're out to pasture.
I have 30 years of experience in ChatGPT.
It doesn't mean nothing. It doesn't. Yeah, experience apparently means nothing. But anyway, the I guess the net is that I feel in many ways we're just not moving the ball down the field. The conversation is almost, I don't want to seem disrespectful to anybody listening or anything like that, but we just got to move the freaking ball down the field, right? I mean, we keep saying business needs to understand security needs to understand business. But at the same time, if you engage with people and you start having this real conversation, and they don't know what is actually really important to the business, except for those who are really entrenched and they've been in that organization for a while. They've risen above that identity of a security dork and more part of the business. Security is almost adjunct to the conversation. It's inherent to the relationship that's been established across the leadership community. And so I think on one sense, that's where we all want to be. We want to achieve that level of awareness, I guess, like a better term. But at the same time, there's so many barriers to getting there, whether it be, bravado or ego or arrogance or ignorance, right? Somewhere one of those words fit, but we're stuck in a loop as an industry.
I think one of the things, Jim, I can't believe you're saying this is still real. Because once we started saying you just need to talk the language of the business, I thought that solved it. Right. But this is what happens. We do this talking head nonsense where we're like, speak the language of the business, but we don't really say what that means. We just say, do it. Like, just speak the language. Like, you're talking tech. They don't understand that. Talk the language of the business. But nobody outside of saying do that is showing how to do that. And we have all these kind of sayings of be a part of the business, work on your soft skills, right? We've started everybody on this. Oh, you have to build up your soft skills. What does that mean? What, you got better at English? Okay, you write better, but that didn't improve your capability to understand business, the risks to business, the context to business, right? And I mean, you go into most, I would say probably most places, right? You go to a security team, a SOC team, an AppSec team, any of those. They are heads down. You think they're listening to the quarterly financial reports, or they're listening even to the town halls that the CEO's putting on? Are like, oh, another meeting. Look, I got work to do. I'm skipping that thing, because it doesn't affect them working on this little piece in their mind, right? It's, I got to make sure this is secure because somebody told me this was the priority, right? And it never funneled down, and they don't open up that eye to say, you know what, I really would like, and I had this. I mean, when I worked for an insurance company way back, not as a security person, but as a developer, it's like, you need to learn all the lines of, like all these different insurance. I'm like, what is this crap? Listen, tell me what I need to write. I'll write it. You know what I mean? But this is, 20-year-old working on the business. You start to learn like, wow, you know what? Maybe I should understand how the business works and what these lines of business mean and all that stuff. You know what I mean? But we keep saying the stuff. We don't ever put anything behind it.
Yeah. So even saying the business is like us versus them language, if you think about it. Right? Like, and I think from a junior level, if you want to be senior, you have to speak. I mean, so forget about security for a minute. Like, let's not look at like every conference I've gone to since I started my career in security. Somebody says, why can't I get the board to pay attention to what I need? Why won't anybody listen to me? Like, that question comes up 100% of the time. If it doesn't, I'm not at a security conference, right? So forget about security for a moment. Look at accounting. Right? When the CFO sits down and talks to the other executives, does the CFO talk about the nuances of GAAP versus non-GAAP reporting and how they came up with the numbers? No, not at all. So I would argue, and I would bet, I'm not an accountant, but that in the CFO's organization, there are people every bit as accountant nerdy on all the stuff. But as that comes up level, it gets abstracted into a broader context of, so who cares for what the company's trying to do? And so the security team has to do the same thing. But I will also say, again, I will die on this hill that the security team has to be accepted. And every CISO I ever know gets calls from, insert title here, the COO, the COO as their personal tech support. So even when you get to that level, a lot of times you're still seen as, I don't know how to update my iPad. Here, come here, Paul. Can you help me with this? And
that's like, because you got 4 letters.
You have to stop being tech support.
Just saying, if you want to be part of the C-suite, drop a letter. Be a CSO. You'll be in like Flynn. You're 4 letters. You're a CISO. You're a TISO. You're a BISO. Whatever. It's all one step below. We have to figure that out.
James got the answer. All right.
Oh, I like that.
I think this is a good place to start or stop or finish.
Oh, can we stop?
Jim completely forgot even had a
half a bottle of kill over here.
I'm done. I don't know about you guys. All right, good conversation. I feel like we always end up in the same place. Paul, I appreciate the color you add because you've had seat time, right? Jim, you've had seat time. I started down that path and realized I was pretty sure I didn't want to go down it. And I stand by that decision today. Whew. But these are very real problems that unless we figure out how to solve, and like the next shiny new box, 27 new buzzwords in AI is not going to solve this. It's just not. So we've got to figure this crap out. We just have to. Because the future sucks.
Raph, maybe it would. Here's the idea that we need. We need ChatGPT where I can say, here's my security info, explain it to the CEO like the CFO would do it. And maybe we would get, like, it would break it down into, hey, CFO typically does like this. I shove my data in there and let it mimic what the CFO or one of the other groups is doing to be able to give that. Because I think to your point, Paul, I think you're right. I mean, CFO, like they migrated into this. They learned how to do this. we're learning how to do that from a security industry, but who's the mentor to really help push that through? I think it's one of those where security's always been, I will do it on my own. So how do we break that barrier down to say, hey, who's my mentor to be able to show me, how do I treat that seed?
I like that.
I would say to the folks out there that are looking to become a CISO, and this whole conversation about understanding the business and all that kind of stuff is, and Raph, you actually may remember some of this stuff, but what I used to say at HP when we were dealing with other features within the business and looking at ways of understanding where we fit in the construct relative to security in the broader business of HP is I always tell people, it's like, first order of business is understand other people's success metrics, right? And if you understand what other parts of the business are trying to achieve, just fundamentally, how are they bonused or how are they tracked? What are the metrics? What do they deem as successful from their world? And you can find a way to be part of that conversation, then you're on the first step of speaking the business. And I think, Paul, you bring up a perfect point about, talking language. It begins to separate. You have to start making things a little bit more personal on some level so you can understand it better. Once you understand it, then it just flows. The language is irrelevant. So that whole point about business language that James, you were mentioning just becomes a shadow. And then you're having a normal conversation. It just isn't full of firewalls and Sims and silly stuff.
But that's the distraction that we're seeing, right? Is the distraction is we're focusing on talk the business language, whatever the other thing was. I don't know why I keep slipping when I'm going to say it. Right. But that's our learn the soft skills, right? Like those are the distractions.
Clear-headed.
That, are keeping us really from getting to the base cause here that we really need to focus on.
Mm-hmm. All right. I'm calling it. That's a wrap. This has been fun. Hey, by the way, if you're listening and you're still listening, I don't know what happened or who told who, but over the last 5 episodes, we're getting like 10% bumps on all these downloads. So thank you. Tell everybody about the podcast. Have them join in and listen. Hell, suggest some more good guests like our buddy Paul down here.
Don't put Paul in the corner.
There's a lot of those people out there that have a good story to share and wisdom to impart. So anyway, this is a good place to end it. Thanks for listening, you guys. James, Jim, great having you guys on the show as always. Paul, thanks for the last minute jump in. I hope you enjoyed it. And
I've had a lot of fun. It's always fun.
Yeah, we try to have a little bit of that. Good fun. All right, folks. Thanks for listening. This has been another Down to Security Rabbit Hole podcast. We'll catch you guys another time, another place. And ciao. We're out. See you later.
This is Bella. Thanks for listening. Don't forget to leave my dad a review and share this with your friends. Bye.